Thank you very much, Monitoring Officer. Prynon da Croeso, good afternoon. Welcome to the Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council full council meeting on Wednesday, the 14th of July, 2021. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and may be broadcast via the authority's internet site. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the authority. Item number 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence. Have we any?
Councillor Harvey Jones, Chair.
And Councillor Chris Barry.
Thank you very much. Item number 2 is declarations of interest. Members are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal prejudicial interest in respect to matters covered in containing this agenda in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government and Finance Act 1992 relating to council tax, the Local Government Act 2000, the council's constitution and the members' code of conduct. Are there any declarations? No declarations. Item number 3 is a presentation. I believe that Steve Thomas is going to take this. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think the slides will fly up at some point, but before they do, can I thank you for inviting us to speak to the full council this evening. I'm accompanied this evening by my colleagues on the core team. There's pictures of us in more formal times there on the screen. Myself, I'm the chair of the Improvement Insurance Board. I've got working with me Christine Salter, formerly the Director of Finance for Cardiff and Interim Chief Executive, who's been dealing with finance, central and support services within the authority. Tony Garthwaite, formerly the Director of Social Services for Bridgend, and Mid Glamorgan, working on social services, housing and HR. And Chris Burns, formerly the Assistant Chief Executive Comanche and the Chief Executive Caerphilly, working on education and the economy. We've all been appointed by and we are accountable to the Welsh Government. Can I have the next slide, please? The background to us coming into the authority, I don't want to dwell on this and I don't want to take too long because I know you've got a very heavy agenda this evening, but it goes back to a Wales Audit Office letter written on the 19th of May in 2019, which was critical of the council and critical of some of the council's service provision. It led to a council request. This was unusual, in fact, but it led to a council request for Section 28 assistance to the Welsh Government in June 2019. A former chief executive from Swindon, a chap called John Gilbert, was brought in to report, and he did in September 2019. He recommended the establishment of an improvement insurance board, which was established in November 2019. He also recommended a number of management changes and service improvements. And we set up a improvement insurance board, which was chaired by the then leader of the council. And we ourselves as a team produced a rapid assessment, which was published on the 25th of February, which did receive some media coverage. And we've then, since that time, had private sessions with the Cabinet. 27th of March, we had meetings between ourselves and the regulators. We've done that ever since. We've met the Wales Audit Office, Estyn and CSIW ever since. And we then report regularly to the Minister almost on a monthly basis. Can I have the next slide, please? And then all our worlds were knocked sideways. And this has made it a very unusual process that we've been involved with, namely that we've undertaken this, like everybody else has undertaken council business over the recent period, largely digitally. And this is, I think, probably the first type of exercise of this nature that's been undertaken on that basis. We agreed at the outset to meet on a monthly basis, on a digital basis, and we were joined at that point. We were very pleased to be joined at that point by the whole Cabinet to ensure an overview of the emergency response and service impact. And we made that a politically balanced approach by also inviting the leader and deputy leader of the Labour group on and the leader of the smaller opposition, the independent group. We refocused our work in August 2020 to March this year to ensure the council had support to deliver against its recovery, transformation and improvement plan. And I'll be talking a little bit about that in more detail shortly. Can I have the next slide, please? I always think when you do a PowerPoint presentation, you should make some reference to Monty Python's Life of Brian, and this is a sort of variant on that. This is what has the core team done for us rather than what has the Romans ever done for us. They are set out there in terms of some of the things that we've arranged through Welsh Government. And again, I want to stress all these things are done in concert with Welsh Government on this through Section 28. We've provided ongoing support for social services through an excellent business manager, Judith Brooks, who's worked consistently from the outset in the social services department. We've more recently brought in Nick Batchelor, the former Director of Education in Cardiff, to work with Merthyr's Education Department, and we'll touch upon that a little bit later. We brought in Rod Alcott, a former Wales Audit Office employee, to help produce the Recovery Transformation Improvement Plan. Rod is hugely experienced and has the massive advantage of living in Merthyr Tydfil. We brought in Rob Baker as well to undertake a review of the HR function of the council, and further support will follow shortly in terms of HR. And we've had ongoing support with the Welsh Government for the local government division and regular reporting to the Minister. The local government division in question being Lisa Hughes primarily, and Claire Germain, also dealing with Julie James and now more latterly Rebecca Evans, the relevant ministers. Can I have the next slide, please? We did it slightly more than that, however, and councillors wouldn't necessarily see all this, but there was generic support within the council. The team has worked with all key service departments to support on key service issues. We've had regular discussions with the leader, the chief executive, senior management, cabinet members, a range of other people. We got involved in the future of the Leisure Trust and worked on brokering an agreement between that and the council. We established the education partnership with your education department across Merthyr Tydfil. Some of our members, Tony in particular, has been involved in senior recruitment in social care. Christine has been working with the corporate centre to develop transformation policies. I'm working with finance, and Chris has been working directly with senior managers, offering support and advice, particularly when it comes to education and the economy. We met the key stakeholders across Merthyr. I won't read them out, they're there on the slide. And we've worked with elected members. And when I checked, I was amazed at this. We've had something approaching nearly 20 improvement and assurance board meetings held over the past 2 years, which has been regular dialogue with yourselves as a council, particularly with the council's executive, but also with the relevant group leaders. And as I said earlier, we are reporting to the Welsh Government and working closely with the authorities, regulators, and we've done ongoing work with my previous organisation, the WLGA, particularly on democratic services, working with a chap called Max Caller. I think some of you will have met. Can I next slide, Dennis? What was the council like when we arrived? It's difficult to sort of give a summary on a sort of PowerPoint because it's difficult to capture some of the things we experienced. And this is the glass half empty slide, but there's a glass half full slide to follow. It was fragile and fractious. There's no point pretending any different. It was consumed by political dramas. We commented in our rapid assessment that much of the debate in the council seemed to happen on Facebook and not within the council. And it seemed to be obsessed with recent history. The former chief executive, Gareth Chapman, had just left, and a range of issues had arisen because of that. But it seemed to have a range of issues in the political arena, which were sort of smallish political dramas, but were consuming a lot of organisational energy. It was a council very high on the risk register of the WAO, the CSW and Estin. It was a council that we felt had its nose just above the waterline. It was coping and hoping for better times, but didn't really know how it was going to get there. It was clearly lacking in capacity in key areas and had a very unhealthy dependency on key staff. One of the first things we urged was a capacity review, which I think was a very important exercise that was undertaken across the council. It had enough plans to shake a stick at, you know, there was plans everywhere and strategies dotted around the council, with some departments responding to different plans. But it all seemed to us to be dominated by short-termism. There was a lot of financial uncertainty. We had great concerns that the council was one bad settlement away from, you know, financial difficulties. Social services, we were told, was the problem. And this seemed to us, and this is something that John Gilbert's report didn't pick up, but it's something we majored on, was that there was a lack of performance awareness, particularly when it came to education. And the statistic there at the bottom probably shows you some of that in terms of what we found. Can I have the next slide, please? There were positives, and I don't want to, make it sound like it was, we came into a state of despair. I mean, there were positives. The council and the wider area has a very huge sense of history and civic pride, and there's real passion for the area, and we've got that from members and officers throughout. We always felt as a small council, it could be a possible exemplar of small council governance. It's got great access to the Brighton Beacons National Park. In retail terms, I mean, I'm from Ebervale and I see Merthyr as, one of the great retail outlets, if you like, but clearly that has changed in terms of the way COVID has rolled out. Regeneration has moved at pace, and, the council has been successful in attracting large retail developments. There's potentially some large projects in the offing. You're going to be talking about one of them tonight in terms of the creation of a special purpose vehicle for the Crucible project. And the council does some of the basics very well. Waste management, you do very well. Planning, you have one of the best planning departments in Wales. Small can be fleet of foot. There's real ambition in the cabinet and amongst all councillors, I would suggest, and the officers for change and improvement. Next slide, please. I won't major on this because you've lived through this. All I would say is that we felt that COVID was a massive and severe test of the authority, and you see the BBC headline there. But I think one of the things we did, and we were very pleased about, was that the council clearly responded to the challenge, as did local government across Wales. I think local government did very well across Wales in terms of its response to COVID. The council responded quickly and with determination, being the first council to undertake mass testing in Wales. And let's be frank, the army took a lot of credit for that, but a lot of the work for that was done by council officers and through the council itself. It had the best distribution of business grants in Wales. Councillors themselves were involved in huge levels of community support, considerable grassroots work, particularly when it came to things like food banks and food distribution, massive efforts by officers, and of course, what we're experiencing now, a new approach to digital working, making a strength of the council proximity. And again, that sort of small is beautiful, I think really did play to Merthyr's advantage during this period. As a result of this period, I think we also, as an improvement and insurance board, began to detect some green shoots in terms of key areas. There was a good social services inspection at the height of the pandemic. There were education recoveries starting to be put in place. There has been a tightening of governance. Now, I'm not saying these things are perfect, and it's difficult to point to any council where these things are perfect, but there are clear signs of improvement in these areas. Can I have the next slide, please? And as a result of that, we took stock as an improvement in insurance board and presented this to one of our boards for debate and discussion. And we'd be interested to know what councillors feel about this SWOT analysis. Sorry, I don't usually like this sort of management terminology, but it's a SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats analysis of the council, which we presented to the insurance board. And we've edited it down to give the main points for the council this evening. So I could go on to the first one, please. There is a new political leadership in the council, and we think that brings stability. There's a renewed focus to drive performance, and we've seen a significant improvement in member-officer relationships over the past 2 years. As I say, I've said this previously, the council has embraced digital, new digital strategy and community-focused services, and the council will clearly want to decide how it goes forward on that basis in the future. But you can see the future of local government, I think, in terms of the way the digital approach has been taken. We urged the council, it took a while, but we urged the council to produce a recovery, transformation and improvement plan, and that sets the framework for a new operating model combined with a different service culture. Now, I don't want to create the impression that this is the answer. The recovery, transformation and improvement plan is part of a suite of answers to some of the issues in the council, but it is a core document, and we're glad that it's in place because it means there is one document that all officers and all council should be working towards, compared to what was the anarchy of multiple strategies before. There has been, and touch wood, and it's been very helpful. There's been 2 years of reasonable financial settlements, and inevitably, with services not being delivered to their full extent, there has been this year a sort of favourable outturn in terms of the council's budget. Again, we hope that provides an opportunity to build a fighting fund going forward for the council. We're very pleased to see the Economic Recovery Board developing a borough-wide economic recovery plan, and we're also very pleased to see those basic services still performing well, the clean, green and safe, despite significant cuts to their budgets over previous years. Go to the next slide, Dennis. There are and there remain weaknesses, however. As I say, there's not a complete clean bill of health. There are changes we think required to ensure that the council's management structure is optimal, and we're working with your new chief executive to look at the senior management structure in the council. We were somewhat confused when we walked into the authority who did what, and what we want to make sure is there's very clear lines of accountability to members in terms of the senior management structure. We still think, and you are not alone in this, because many councils do this, they live from 1 year to the next in terms of the budget, but we still think there's short-termism within the budget setting process and a lack of strategic focus. I know you're discussing the medium-term financial plan tonight, and hopefully that, as well as the transformation plan, becomes the core document driving the council. We have a concern, for example, that annual budget savings are based on a myriad of small savings rather than significant changes to service delivery. Despite the capacity review, there are and there remain weaknesses in the staff structure. There's still over-reliance on certain members of staff to perform certain functions, and that is something which I think the council will have to address over the period. We've ourselves has attended scrutiny committees, in the Wales Audit Office has recently said the same thing as well. We think scrutiny can be very good. We think it can be good. We think it can be indifferent. And we think sometimes the function can be variable and prone to self-congratulation. I think there's more improvement work required in this area, which has stalled, I think, as a result of the pandemic. The education service is the one service that really did concern us from the moment we walked in through the door. It was one of those services where Merthyr has been 22 for a long time. There's been some improvement over in recent years, but the authority's gone back to that position. What we want to see is a education department working with all partners, particularly the education consortium, to significantly improve Merthyr's relative position at the national level. And that means particularly coming when we get back to normal in terms of results and exams. And the HR function we were concerned about does not fulfill the needs of the council in terms of developing and implementing an effective workforce strategy. And again, that's something I think that needs further work. There are opportunities, and I've already gone through some of these, but that small scale governance, I think, is something which I think played to Merthyr's strengths during the pandemic. And I think, again, it offered key insights into the way the council can improve and undertake community well-being. It offered key insights as well into the need and level of service provision. I mean, your Leisure Services Trust has not provided services strictly for a year and yet is in profit. So I think members have got to start to ask questions about the nature of service provision. Does the pandemic provide lessons for the levels and outcomes of service provision? The council's RTI plan offers members that very clear opportunity to drive transformation, and I think ensure robust performance monitoring. But that's got to be properly resourced. The Economic Development Officer for the area has significant potential, but I think there's a lot of work to be done in terms of how the council moves forward in the future, particularly with its previous reliance on retail. We think there is now a real and significant opportunity, and Chris Burns may want to speak about this, to improve the education service with an increased commitment from the South Wales Central Consortium and the frameworks in place to deliver the required scale of improvement. Now, That may happen over a number of years, indeed will happen over a number of years, but that is the nature of education. It is very much turning the tank around in the channel. The scale and pace of improvement can take a long time. There's better project and business management in social services. And on the last one then, there is headroom afforded by reasonable financial settlement, which has replenished the council's reserves. Next slide, please. Threats. You know these better than we do. You live in the community, you know what's happening out there. But from our point of view, what we see is the impact of the pandemic on children, particularly their mental health, poverty, and the impact on education is absolutely vital. We think that appropriate steps are taken to help pupils catch up on teaching missed during the lockdown. There could be, and your social services department have warned us and used the phrase about the potential tsunami of an increase in caseloads for social services, particularly in terms after looked after children. The reason we are here is because that budget for a while, dramatically overspent. But that's going to be an issue for all councils across Wales over the next period. The potential scale of the post-pandemic economic crisis shouldn't be underestimated. There are some indices on youth unemployment that are already disturbing, although the jobs market is looking slightly more robust than we thought it might do. The social cohesion of a post-industrial town is fragile, and again, there are institutions in place, and particularly the council, which protects the social fabric, and as a result of that, the council's got to be performing at an optimum level. And the one thing I think where there's a real potential for a sting in the tail is the outlook for the public finances is not good. You saw £4 billion cuts last night to the overseas development budget. There's talk of stopping the extra £20 per week on universal credit. Clearly, the Westminster government is seeking to deal with the deficit and reduce the levels of public borrowing. The current set of figures from the government, analysed by Cardiff University, are alarming, and I hope they change in time for next year's settlement. Next slide, please. Christine, do you want to comment on this?
By all means, Steve, and thank you, Chair. So this slide follows neatly on from that SWOT analysis, really, and what you've got here are 5 priorities, really, which I think you need as a council to take into account and work on in order to become more sustainable and going forward. So you can read what they say, but what they're saying, it starts with medium-term budgeting. And I think the practice in Merthyr in the past has been to produce a medium-term plan which shows how you can fix that gap in terms of budget deficit. I think in the future more work needs to go on as to how exactly are those savings going to be made, or that income increase going to be made, in order for the budget to be balanced. The windfall surplus that you received last year in the accounts, I think obviously needs to be used to assist with financial resilience in the future. So your outturn report is putting more money into earmarked reserves and increasing your general reserves, all good things to do. And that money will be there to help you going forward. Steve's spoken about the RTI plan. And my comment on that is that as it is being delivered, as those service improvements happen, it's important financially to understand the savings that those projects were due to deliver, whether they have been delivered, and that's in terms of either actual savings or whether what's been happening is to provide cost avoidance in your services going forward, so you can afford to do more than you might have been able to do in the past. Council's commercial strategies being worked up, isn't it? And that's important going forward. My point here is that it's important that finance as a department, part of the organisation, is involved in that development to make sure that the projects there are financially achievable, both in terms of outward looking but also inward looking within the council. The first real part of commercial change within an organisation is to understand your cost profile within the authority and to make sure that the mindset around services, whatever services are concerned, are approaching those that expenditure with a commercial focus in mind. And then finally, I've picked up council tax collection. You will know that prior to the pandemic, your council tax collection was quite low in across Wales. And during the pandemic, there's been lots of support given to councils to help that not be a problem to finances. But once the impact of the pandemic is, moving to the background, then work needs to be done to catch up and to make sure that you understand what's happening, what people are having to cope with in terms of universal credit reductions and that sort of thing, to make sure that your council tax collection doesn't reduce further and you are getting as much as you can to help support your services from your council taxpayers. So as I say, I think they're the 5 priorities that I see in terms of finance going forward. Thanks,
Thank you, Christine. Next slide. Tony.
Yes, thank you, Steve. We've when we came originally, I think we felt we were going to walk into a social services department, in a mixture of chaos and dysfunction. I think what we actually found was a department that was struggling terribly with a lack of capacity, but making up for that with a tremendous amount of hard work and commitment, and desperately trying to do all the right things, especially in partnership with neighbours and the local health board. A cabinet member who was hugely committed to the cause, and a management team that was really fighting hard to keep the service afloat. So what we felt, straight away was maybe this wasn't the problem that was first reported, because we saw a lot of good strategies and plans in place. Then, just to prove that perhaps our own detection was correct, along comes CIW and reported not, a clean bill of health. CIW inspections are never clean bills of health, but they reported the most important thing of all, that they felt that the people in the care of the social services in Merthyr were safe. What we've seen since is that partnership work, and I referred to working better across the council services. There's some really good work, for instance, going on internally with housing, the beginnings of some work with education, but also across the whole of the region. And I think it's not insignificant that Councillor Chris Davis, as cabinet member, now chairs the regional partnership board, because we did get the feeling that Merthyr, as the minnow in that partnership, was perhaps making a great effort to be an equal partner, but we maybe wasn't always the case, really. Steve mentioned Judith Brooks, who's an ex-colleague of mine in Bridgend, and who is a tremendously competent officer. My slides have gone. I don't know why. Are they still up on your screens? No.
No, they've gone.
Oh, I'll have to just make it up then, shall I?
I think we've lost Dennis Cooper. He's probably going to try to rejoin now.
Okay, should I just wait a second now?
Yeah. If you, there it goes.
Sorry, this is Kerry here. Can you see the presentation now?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll just go to you slide now. Okay.
There you go. Yes, thank you very much, Terry. And what Judith has done, I think, is just supported Lisa and the team in just using performance better, because I think it's okay knowing what you should be doing, but can you be sure if you haven't got a really good performance management system and culture? And what we've seen is that now is becoming very much embedded, and people who have followed the board meetings will see that there's good quality information comes forward to every board meeting about activity in social services, things like the numbers of looked after children and so on. The half full, half empty analogy stays, however, and I still worry greatly about capacity, to be honest, and that's linked with that point, the next point about this heavy reliance on key individuals. When I looked first, and I was absolutely shocked that there was only, I think, one principal officer working with Angela Edivan in adult services around sort of strategic functions and so on. I was told that initially that was as many as 6 about 10 years ago, and the cuts have bitten in and so on. I think lately you've approved an additional post there, and that's great. But make no mistake, that capacity is still fragile and will remain fragile, I think, for some time. So you've got to keep a very close eye on that, especially as there are these unknown effects that Steve referred to on the back of the pandemic, a mixture of well-publicized issues around mental health, around domestic abuse, and so on. There's another interesting slide, something's come up on my screen now. But I think I remember what the last bullet point was anyway, which was just to remind you as members that we always talk about resources in social services and always sort of criticized for it. I used to say when I was director, give me the money and I'll spend it. And that's not an irresponsible thing to say, as long as you spend it in the right way and the right things. And part of that is about change and making sure that services are fit for purpose moving forward, but also responding to need. And that need is very unpredictable. We were told that as few as 2 families moved into Merthyr and added, the best part of between 5 and 10% to your looked after children numbers. So I will leave you with my usual ex-director of social services reminder that these children and these vulnerable people don't belong to Councillor Chris Davies or Lisa Curtis-Jones or Taryn Stevens or Angela Edivan. They are your corporate responsibility, and I know it's difficult and I know budgets are tight, but by working together, you make sure that your social services department is spending money wisely, and they in turn, I think, have an obligation to alert you to any of these crises coming downstream. But I have to say that I'm optimistic because I think there's a lot of good foundations in your social services department moving forward. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Tony. Can I go to Chris then, just last on education?
Yes, thank you, Steve, and thank you, Mayor. The education area was one of the biggest concerns that came before us, really, in the early days of the work of the core team, and it was particularly, although not entirely, around attainment levels at GCSE, where the authority was losing ground on everybody else in Wales, really. Now, members will recall some months ago, you considered and approved a new strategy of raising aspirations, raising attainment strategy. And I sat in on the discussions at both scrutiny and at full council, where I think that new strategy had a very strong cross-party endorsement right across the authority, which I think was a very strong signal that the council is determined to grapple with this issue. Some great strides, I think, have been taken in the last year during the most difficult period you could possibly have had to try to tackle these issues. I think the authority has made very good progress, particularly pulling together this new education partnership panel, which is a really good indication of cross-organisational working, where everybody is working together. And this is going to need a concerted team effort with each of the players, whether it's school governors, who have a huge role to play, and many members will be on governing bodies where they have a big responsibility, head teachers, teaching staff, the South Wales Consortium, the authority itself, Merthyr College, all of these players working together as a team through the new Education Partnership Panel really has given a very good indication, very good hopes for the future. But obviously the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. And at the moment, we have no examination results for last year or for this year to judge whether the authority is indeed making any headway. So I think there'll be some very nervous people, well, everywhere in Wales next July when next year's exam results come out, but probably nowhere more nervous than in Merthyr Tydfil, because that will be the first opportunity in the exam results for next year to see whether some progress has been made. Now, as I say, the difficulty is that obviously the last 12 months has been the most disrupted period for education ever, and this really has put an awful lot of pressure on children and young people, not just on their education, but on their well-being and the more social aspects of being with friends and being in school, etc. So there's a huge rebuilding effort to be undertaken by schools and by everybody within the system. So as I say, Mayor, the education did highlight itself as one of the bigger concerns when we started our work, but I think we're very encouraged by the sense of urgency and the seriousness with which the authority has recognised the situation. It's putting more resources into what was a very, very small team within the authority to manage this service. And it is now harnessing, I think, a more focused level of support from key people like the South Wales Education Consortium. So, this was a concern. This is still a concern. We won't really know for a number of years whether this situation is being turned around. But certainly, I don't think anybody could fault the authority for the commitment that is showing at the moment.
And thank you, Chris. Could we go on to the final slide, the final two slides? We've colloquially turned. Sorry, I should go back a little bit. I was asked recently by one of your officers, and excuse me, Mayor, for my French at this point. One of your officers, and I'll let you guess who it was, said to me, "When are you lot going to bugger off?" And the answer to that is I'll let you guess who said it. The answer to that comes in this next slide and the following slide. We've held a workshop with your senior managers, and we're about, I think, to hold a workshop with the cabinet at some point. And obviously, we want your views as a council. But what we're asking your senior managers in particular to think about are the 5 points below. And you're discussing one of them tonight in terms of the medium-term financial plan. We are not expecting all these things to be fixed in the next period. They might not be fixed for a couple of years, but what we want to see is tangible and real progress on all of these elements. And we think we can detect it in some areas. We still think there's weaknesses in other areas. But just to go through them, we've got governance, management, performance, finance, transformation, and specific service areas, and community resilience. Now, I've touched upon all these things, and we'll have this discussion, I say, with the cabinet shortly on these matters. But I think these are the key things we'll want to have assurance on. We'll need to go back to the minister at some point and say, yes, we are confident that Merthyr has all these things covered. They can tick the box. Can I have the final slide, please? There's a phrase missing in there, should be, how can the council return to a situation of self-sustaining improvement? One of the things we said to the cabinet when we first met them was that, and we meant this, didn't mean this in a condescending way, but we meant this in a way that would stop some of the noise that was emanating from the council, was that a period of quiet from you would be most welcome. And what we meant by that was to get away from some of the smaller issues that were perplexing the council and start to think about some of the bigger issues, which will continue to perplex you, but probably make less headlines. So what we'd say to you in terms of a report at this point is stay on course. We think there is tangible improvement to be seen. It could well be that the core team of the board is no longer required in at some point in the not too distant future, but that is in your gift in one sense. If the noise re-emerges, if the problems re-emerge, well, we could be around for a much longer period. What I'm hoping, however, is that we can see the continuation of the current progress that we're seeing. And that, I think, would lead to us waving you goodbye and the board being stood down. But ultimately, let me stress this, the ultimate decision about standing the board down rests with the Minister and Welsh Government. And it's for them to judge from the reports that we give to them how the council is performing. We think the council is doing well at the current time, bearing in mind the circumstances, but as I say, we're not quite there yet. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. It was a very informative and comprehensive presentation. Thank you. Are you taking questions?
Certainly, yeah.
Okay, any questions then, members? Yes, Councillor Clive Jones, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was referred to by Tony Garthwaite in his section on social services that, I quote, social service department is struggling with capacity, and another statement there that there was heavy reliance on key individuals to deliver services. Now, my understanding is that there are senior positions which have been filled, but perhaps could Tony or Steve indicate where the key individual posts are that are vacant at the moment?
Shall I answer that, Chair? I wasn't necessarily talking about vacancies so much as numbers, Councillor Jones, in the sense of the example I gave around adult services, for instance. When you've only got one principal officer, it's the you run into the don't get run over by a bus scenario, you know, because that one accident equals the end of that service in effect. This sort of, and Steve alluded to what we call single dependency jobs, and one of the challenges I think for the authority, and when you're small, it's inevitable that you get this kind of situation. You know, you haven't got the kind of scale that people like Cardiff, you know, for instance, can lean on. I can remember my days. Forgive me for this, but remember my days in Middlemorgan. If we had a crisis in, say, the Cynon Valley, or Merthyr for that matter, we could deploy people from Ogor or Taffili and so on, and bridge the gap very quickly. You know, unitary authorities in general in Wales have struggled to do that, but Merthyr is the smallest, clearly would struggle more than most. And I think small can be beautiful. And Steve said, I think there are tremendous opportunities, as you've demonstrated in the pandemic, to prove you know, that small is a strength as well as a threat, if you like. But when it comes to sheer numbers, there's not much, you know, being small is not an advantage, you know. So I'm not, Clive, if you don't mind me saying, I'm not talking so much about vacancies, because I think people are getting on and filling the jobs. It's more about the hard numbers. So is the headline that you've doubled your capacity in adult services senior management from 1 to 2, or is the headline, you know, you're still 2/3 less than you were a few years ago? And, you know, this is work in progress, and it's not a begging bowl. As I said, I think that there's got to be terms and conditions here in terms of you have to insist that your social department deserves the support of capacity. But I think they are proving that. Just I would suggest you keep a very close eye on it in terms of the overall strength and resilience, especially if there are, you know, increased cases coming down the road. So I meant capacity in its widest context.
Yes, thank you for explaining that. And of course, the what's been mentioned as well, Mr. Mayor, is the tsunami is just about to start. When everything, all the restrictions are gone, then you find the effect of the pandemic, and obviously one department, apart from education, that's going to be in the front line is social services. Mr. Mayor, I have another question in relation to the financial side, and Christine referred to work to improve council tax connection. The pandemic work needs to be done. So in that respect, we can't deny the fact, Mr. Mayor, of the issues and problems that we had here already in the county of Borough Merthyr Tydfil, i.e. all the indices tell you that there are all sorts of issues, from unemployment right down to the fact that people haven't got the finances to run their households. I don't know whether Christine can point to specifics there where the council can start to improve their council tax collection, hopefully during this current financial year.
Thank you, Chair. I think what I'm talking about is making sure that you understand the position of your council tax, your residents, to understand if they're paying by direct debits, encouraging direct debits, understanding if they're on universal credit, to set up payment plans, and just to keep a close eye on that recovery. I understand the point about, you know, people's first priority is food rather than council tax payments. I would suggest, but it's about information, isn't it, and data, and just being, from a financial perspective, being on top of those things. So if somebody starts to go into arrears, know that they're starting to go into arrears, and perhaps provide, you know, support, understanding, just that support, really, to understand. As I say, information, data is key, isn't it? And I think, you know, over time, as I said at the beginning, your council tax collection rate wasn't particularly good. So it's doing what you can for it not to fall back further, and to start creeping up when you can into those mid 90% and above, really. But it's about data and information, and knowing and supporting your residents.
Thank you very much for that answer. That clarifies it a lot more for me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Julian Amos, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to refer to something that Steve said in his concluding remarks. You said it was, you picked up that on a subject of governance and the relationships between the political groups and the officers and the elected members. And at the very beginning of your presentation, one of the things you said was that when you came in, things were between the groups were, I think, fragile and fractious were words you used, and too many political dramas, which I certainly can endorse. That wasn't the case. And then he went on to say about our strengths were that there was new political leadership and bringing stability. And I have to say, I think Lisa has done an outstanding job in that period. My question really is, and I'm not sure if you can answer it really, Steve, but how confident are you that this is going to be sustainable?
I am confident it's going to be sustainable, because I think the with the leadership you have in place, and with the relationships that have been built not only across the group, but I think also, the relationships have improved with the local member of parliament, I was going to say the AM, the MS. I need to get up to the speed here, don't I? But I think all those relationships have improved, and from our point of view, that's absolutely key. We want to see sort of stability at the leadership level, and we want to ensure that what we detected as a improved set of member officer relations stays in place. I think that will be the case. I mean, you've got an election coming up, and I don't expect you all to have a group hug every single day in the election. You're all going to be saying not so nice things about each other, I would have thought at that time, but that's the cut and thrust of politics, and that's the nature of the beast. But I think in terms of day-to-day administration, there are foundations in place now in the council to ensure continuity. And I think the leadership, and I would pay tribute to Councillor Mitten on this, I think the leadership has settled over the recent period. And I think from our point of view, that has been one of the determining factors. We put very firmly into that box labelled green shoots.
Thank you, Steve. That's brilliant.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Amos. Councillor Chris Davis, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wonder, I don't have a question, but I wonder whether you will just indulge me just to make a few comments.
We come back to comments after the questions, Chris.
Fine, no worries, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So, Councillor Tony Rogers, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excellent presentation, Steve. I don't agree with all of it, and I'm sure that other elected members. But to say it's a fractious council, it's the quietest council I've ever known. It's more quiet than in a convent. You know, that's not fractious. I've never known. And I've been a member off and on for 2 breaks for 45 years. I mean, I was here before some were born, like, but it's not fractious. The problem you got really is it's too small. This council is too small. I actually moved a resolution a number of years ago, seconded by Councillor Amos, that we join up with RCT, because you're always going to be the bottom because you haven't got no scope or capacity. That's the problem with this local authority. So I can see you here till you retire, Steve. The way it's going, you might be part-time then, but I think you'll still be here, actually. So my question is, or basically pass you on the question, and I want to make a comment after. Basically, the question is, this council and the authority is too small to to overcome all these problems. So I'd rather you say yes or no, because I think it is, and it is. We are very, very difficult. How could you have one missing or nobody left? That's not the way to run. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Councillor Rogers. And you told us the story about how you the line about the council not being fractious when we met you, and we agreed with that. Actually, we think that you know, say a lot of the divisiveness is on social media and not within the council. It's played out in other parts, and we agree with the point that you're making in terms of mergers with any neighbouring authorities. That's something we've always looked at in the course of the work that we've undertaken. I think we were looking at, you know, the capacity in terms of education and social services, and the future of those two services. It may well be in the future that those services need to merge with to get larger scale. You know, I would not rule that out. I think the Welsh Government published a brand new act, the Local Government Act, which brings together corporate joint committees, and they are looking to get aggregation of scale at a regional level on a number of functions. It doesn't touch on some of the bigger functions as yet, like social care and education. But I mean, what you've done when it comes to school improvement is effectively aggregate your services to a regional level, and I think that will continue. That said, I think coming out of a pandemic, if anybody thinks local government reorganisation is the answer, they are asking for problems. I think the bottom line is, you know, the key thing in the next period, for the next few years at least, is service continuity, and that's going to be absolutely key. I don't think the Welsh Government have any intentions at the current time to do any form of local government reorganisation, and I agree with the Welsh Government on this. I think you do need service continuity, but I think as well you should look at all service options for the future. If delivering services with neighbouring authorities is the best way forward, then do that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clive Jones, you dropped out the meeting, but you've come back in and you were next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, there was a technical hitch and I've got back in time. I had a third question which I should have asked because it was about the exiting strategy. How much time, more time do you think, Stevie, will require to remain with this authority, or is that the $64,000 question?
I'd love to give you an answer to that, Clive. I think from our point of view, it's when we go to Welsh Government and we say to Welsh Government that we are essentially sanguine about the authority's prospects, and the Welsh Government agree with us. I don't think we're quite there yet. I think there are things that we want to sort of continue to have I think the fashionable term is deep dive into. I think we want to have a look at some of the continuance of service provision. But, from our point of view as well, we're not determined just to stay here forever and a day. I think all of us would like to be in a position where, if the opportunity comes, we depart at the earliest opportunity. But it's up to the Welsh Government to take that decision. I think from our point of view, as I say, because of that, and again, understanding there's election coming up, but because of that, I think the current levels of progress, I'd be absolutely shocked if we were here this time next year, if these levels of progress continue. In fact, I'd be shocked if we were much after Christmas, these levels of progress continue. And, I hope we're in a position to reach, some sort of accommodation with the council in due course. But that's partly your responsibility as well as ours.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Andrew Barry, did you have a question?
Yeah, it's I don't know about the board leaving. I'm under the impression that all members in the executive need to leave because you seem to have done it all, if I listen to you, which I'm not particularly happy with. It's a comment on a question, no, it's not a comment, it's a question on finance. And quite blasé over the course of the presentation, there's been several comments in terms of its Welsh Government revenue settlement that has bailed us out. Have we done an analysis of that medium-term financial plan from 2016 to where we are now to substantiate that?
Thank you, Councillor Barry. We haven't done an explicit exercise, but I think in looking at the increases in Welsh Government settlement and setting that against your commitments and liabilities, I think, and then also the savings that you've proposed to make over that time, I think that the balance is that the settlement has provided you with the opportunity to not have to cut your services as much as you might have had to do had the settlements not been so reasonable for you.
Well, we're not cutting, we're investing. I suggest you do that analysis because it's quite telling. It gives you the broader picture of the work that's been done by the officers and the members of this authority. The other point I want to pick you up on is you say about increasing the council tax collection rate. I wonder if you've got any more advice on that with regard. We are first and second with Blaenau Gwent in the deprivation on the deprivation index, and first and second on the highest council tax. I'm not surprised we haven't got a high collection rate. And would you say that we need to make or strengthen that connection between the two, and then perhaps Welsh Government can look in terms of levelling up the accountability of those two?
Obviously, Councillor, the rates of council tax is down to your decision. What I was talking about is, as I answered to Councillor Jones, it's understanding your residents and getting as much data and information about when they can pay, when they stop paying, and understanding their circumstances. So those things will also help you to get as much council tax in as you can, based on what you've budgeted for, really. As I say, I think that's what I was talking about. Obviously, the council tax system itself and the different rates that currently authorities have got are steeped in history, and there are exercises going on, as you know, to look at reforming council tax, but that's a very difficult thing to do, really. But I think understanding your residents and their payment profiles is a good place to start for you.
Just on that point, there is a commitment in the Welsh Government to look at council tax. If I can go back to the previous point, Councillor Barry, you yourself on a number of occasions have said that you were fearful for the future when it came to some of the finance settlements. I think we all were relieved at the level of finance settlements over recent years. There's no point, to denying the fact that, a 4% settlement is much better than a flat settlement. And I think, from that point of view, that really did assist the council. But that doesn't, and I would agree with the point you're making, and the trustee, the council itself is making its own savings. But at the same time, I think, in the future, and we've discussed this on many occasions, I think the council will need a fighting fund as it goes forward, because some of the financial indices in the future are alarming. And I think the greater cushion that the council has, the more it will survive into the future.
You can see by our investment in our earmarked reserves, Steve, that we're investing 2.5 million now in terms of longer term sustainability.
Absolutely.
I think one thing I'll grant you is that there's an urgency that's been brought to this authority by your presence, which I don't think was there before, and a clarity as to, in some areas, with what to do. I'll pay tribute to social services and the work Tony's done there, because he's done a phenomenal job along with Chris, along with the senior managers. And I think that will pay dividends on what is the most volatile budget that we have. And the investment into the future will pay dividends there in both revenue and capital. So I do pay tribute. And I think in terms of exit, it does worry me, because this is a sovereign, democratically elected authority. And it does worry me when you talk almost as though it has been taken over by Welsh Government, and just some assurance from you that we haven't been taken over by Welsh Government. This is a voluntary arrangement.
We've stressed from the outset that this is not an intervention. I mean, I've said at the beginning of the presentation, this is an extraordinary approach by Welsh Government in many respects. And I pay tribute to Welsh Government, because they've invested a lot of money into the authority in terms of support, we've given, in terms of support of the people we've brought into the authority. I would also pay, and I'd go back to your earlier point, I'd also pay huge tribute to your officers. I mean, from Alice Cooper, Alan Owen, Andrew Mogford, the range of officers. I think they've done an excellent job over the period in terms of the work that they've done, particularly in terms of producing the recovery, transformation and improvement plan at the height of a pandemic. That is an incredible achievement. And I think from our point of view, we see you as elected members as well, passionate about the county borough. We don't want to stay any long, we don't want to stay a welcome. We want to get out as quickly as we possibly can. And, and I'll give you an assurance on that point that we will get out when the time is appropriate. There's no Welsh Government takeover. This is about us working jointly with yourselves as a council to sustain the improvement that we've all worked on.
And that commitment to HR, we need an HR specialist to oversee quite a specialist area of work, which is the core to this authority. So I look forward to that remaining, as I look forward to your exit.
We'll thank you on that. There is a name in Welsh Government as it stands at the moment on HR expertise, which is hopefully sitting on the desk of the minister, and hopefully she will approve it in the next days or weeks, and we will get further HR with that. And we also look forward to our exit as well, Councillor Barry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barry. We'll take a question from Councillor Julian Amos, and then we'll move on to comments, please.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. It was more of a comment, so I'll defer then for other people to ask their questions.
Okay, yeah, I don't think anybody else has indicated a question, so we'll move on to comments. We'll go to Councillor Chris Davis first, and then come to you, Councillor Amos.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Steve and the core team, thank you for your presentation to council this evening. Tony, I just wanted to put on record at full council, really, you're on my absolute thanks to you for your counsel, your guidance, your support, and appropriate challenge for the time that you've been here. Helping us in social care to secure improvements. Your assistance has been absolutely invaluable. All of those years service in local government, and we've had the benefit of those over the last 18 months, 2 years, over a really difficult period. The support that you have brokered in to us by Welsh Government in the form of Judith. And I wanted to thank you really at Council this evening to set out the challenges for a small but beautiful organisation that is Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council, because in a social care context we have the same statutory duties and responsibilities that big local authorities have, and more medium-sized authorities, to ensure that we meet those obligations and duties set out in a range of legislation to support children, young people, families and vulnerable residents. And capacity can be a challenge. I am pleased and proud that through the capacity exercise, we've been able to through Cabinet and Corporate Management Team, agree some additional posts, into the council structure, a principal manager across adult services, assessment care management, responding to some of the comments of CIW in terms of safeguarding, and a senior social work practitioner in safeguarding. We are now, as a directorate and led by Lisa and Angela and Taryn, looking at bringing forward some investor safe business cases. The volatile nature of some of our budgets will remain a challenge for us, but it's a challenge that we are up for. We want to transform services as we reset for resilience. And thank you for acknowledging, because you and I, when you came here, talked about kind of little old Merthyr in that, that little fish in a big pond. And, the partnership arena for us over the last year has absolutely blossomed. I'm really pleased to, be the chair of the Regional Partnership Board. Lisa Curtis-Jones now is chairing the Children and Young People's Programme Board. We've got Taryn, who's the vice chair of one of the subgroups looking at children and young people's emotional and physical resilience. Angela's chairing the group around the market stability for care homes. So we're really well placed. We're a small team. We're absolutely embedded, because that's where you've got to be to be in it. Or to win it, you've got to be in it. And we're at the table, and to have Luena and to have Judith, who's brought that additional capacity and resource to the team, has made so much of a difference. Just my final comment, Mr. Mayor, is to that about the reorganization of local government. I absolutely don't believe that's the way to go. We've had a good strategic conference this week through the Regional Partnership Board and the Public Service Board, and we really want to drive innovation, collaboration and partnership together across those key strategic boards for the council. And for me, it's not about takeovers from any bigger authorities. That isn't the answer. It's actually the opportunities we have to work together innovatively, collaboratively and creatively to support the communities, and particularly across the regional footprint, which is Bridgend, Merthyr and Rhondda Cynon Taf. So, thank you again for your continued, support and, assistance to us in Merthyr. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davis. Councillor Julian Amos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, actually, Councillor Davis has said a lot of what I was going to say. I must admit, I don't agree with some of what Councillor Barry said, because I also would like to thank you for your involvement. And I've got to say, when you came in, the Minister asked you to come in, and you and your colleagues put a lot of hard work in, and as your presentation indicated, we are now far, far better as an authority, and so that isn't a coincidence. Before you came in, we were in a bad place, and now we're not. So I'd like to thank you and your team for all you've done, and things have come on leaps and bounds, particularly in the last 7 months. We are now in a far, far better place. So I'd like to thank you, Steve.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Amos. Councillor Tanya Skinner, please.
Hang on. Hello, can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? I'm not sure if my microphone is working.
Yes, we can hear you.
Right. Okay, it was just a comment just to say that picking up on the fragile and fractious comment, which everybody seems to have picked up on at some point tonight. Just to say that from my perspective, I think it was actually spot on, and it was very fractious and fragile before. But it's been really reassuring and promising to see the local authority being led by Councillor Mitten. I think her approaches and ability to foster professional and effective relationships is exactly what was needed. Lisa brings with her a wealth of political knowledge and experience, and I think that really shows in the way that she presents herself in full council and in the public arena, particularly in press interviews and so on. And, you know, it'd be lovely to see Lisa carry on in that role after the next election. Which brings me to my last comment is I do worry what will happen after the next election. And would urge the situation to continue to be monitored to ensure that any progress that has been made will continue for the next election cycle, and we can maintain everything that's happened so far, because obviously what can happen is an election happens, we get a whole raft of new people coming in, and we may very well go backwards again. So, you know, it would be nice to see the progress that has been made to sustain and stay in place to some degree, you know. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Skinner. Councillor Darren Roberts, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Steve, for that presentation, of which I must say is an extremely accurate appraisal of the last 18 months. Personally, from my perspective, I think the SWOT analysis is spot on. And I echo the comments from some of my colleagues here this evening. When yourself and the rest of your team were appointed, it was a breath of fresh air from my point of view, because I knew with the experience that was coming in that the local authority were in safe hands. And I'd also like to thank you for this update for full council. As you know, during the board meetings, I've been waxing lyrical for this update for all 32 elected members to receive an update. So I thank you and your team for that, and thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Councillor Clive Jones, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two comments. First of all, I echo what Councillor Darren Roberts has said, because I've been attending several of the improvement and assurance boards, and the fact that we've got 4 very experienced ex-local government officers there has brought benefits to the running of this authority. And I, for one, and I know many other members on the council, approve of all the work that you've done, reported in the board and behind the scenes, all the time that you've been here, Steve, and your other 3 colleagues. And I'd also like to comment on a statement and a form of a question that Councillor Tony Rogers made. I remember the council meeting when you moved a motion that we should join with another authority. As you said, it was RCT at the time. And my recollection of that is that you had 2 votes and 31 voted against it. As Steve Thomas has said, we need another local government reorganisation in Wales, like a hole in the head. And I'm old enough to have experienced local government reorganisation as a local government officer in 73, 74 and 95, 96 when I was elected member. I don't believe that to have an authority, which it would mean, I think in the size of RCT, of between 300,000 to 400,000 population is the answer to local government. I think we have done very well on the whole over many years, running an authority with a population of 60,000, and it's proven that we can do it, and I honestly believe that's the way forward for Merthyr Tydfil. Being big, massive is not the answer always. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. We'll just take comments from the people who have indicated at the moment, and then we'll move on, I think. So, Councillor Geraint Thomas, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Steve, and the Assurance Board for your appraisal this evening. Obviously, I was new to council. I only came into 4 years ago and into cabinet, and it has been a steep learning curve, you know, for all us new councillors, and there was a lot of us that came in at the last election. And for me, I'm one for looking forward and not backwards. Obviously, I'm the cabinet member for regeneration, commercialisation and transformation now for the local authority, and I can see shoots of recovery. People say, you know, that a sign of a town that's doing, or a city doing well, is the cranes in the sky. Well, at the moment in Merthyr, we got scaffolding on buildings everywhere, right? Everywhere. There's new shops opening, there are new restaurants opening, new bars opening, so we can see the recovery coming already. And I believe the commercialisation part that we just brought into the council in the last meeting and going forward is going to play a major part, along with the master plan that we're bringing forward for the town centre, so the local authority can bring in some revenue and some capital receipts going forward that's going to make it sustainable years into the future. So, you know, that's what I got. You know, I got hope, and I've got a belief in this council and this town of ours that we can make a real good fist and a fight to be, you know, a major conurbation and a major centre for Wales long into the future. So thank you all.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. So we'll take a comment from Councillor Tony Rogers, and then Councillor Lisa Mitten will make some closing comments. Councillor
man or woman sitting in this meeting tonight, and myself for the Merthyr Tydfil. Have a look at my record, I'll tell you all about it. But Clive, you must remember we live in a democracy. And if I put a point forward, I expect you to be heard. If you put your point forward, I respect you, and I always have. You know that from the trade union days, when you were with Nalgo and I was chairman of the not of the council. And what I'm saying is that we, as a local authority, and well, it's not going to, obviously not going to come in now, Steve. We know that. But the idea is that we have far too many councils. I think if you go back to the old county council, the area there, 8, 10 in Wales, that's enough. Because I'll tell you why. We are always going to be poverty-stricken. You're not going to get enough money. You're not going to get the capacity. We're not going to get it. And that's my complaint. But I don't want to debate around tonight on the reorganisation of councils. It's a point I made. It's a point I think, my opinion, right there, because I'm a Democrat. But I would like to say this. I've been called into the cabinet, asked for the last 6 months, and I've worked with people there who are absolutely dedicated. And the leadership of Lisa Mitten, and I'm very, very proud what they have been doing. I'll class myself, but I wrote to them, self-praise and no recommendation. I don't believe in that. But it's an excellent going forward. And the commitment here has been second to none. So what I'm saying at the end of the day is, we will always struggle as a local authority. Too small, we aren't going to have scope, we won't have enough capacity. We can trickle on probably, you know, you're going on. But when it comes down to you've got a couple of people missing, that is dangerous. So I don't think we can build that. So that's my opinion, but I don't want to go into that. But that's not the point tonight. The point tonight is, hopefully, when you're going to finish, when you're going to go, and let Merthyr Tydfil go on with his business. But at the moment, having read those reports there tonight, which is graphic in front of us, Steve, very graphic. You know, we bottom of the, I've got to say it, we bottom of the education. Now, if we were in the Premier League, we'd be down to the Championship. We'd be relegated. That's what we'd be doing. So there's a massive improvement to be made. This cabinet is good. I've got to be honest, sir. I've worked with many in my time, but they're good. But it's just an important point is that when the time comes to go, you will be satisfied that all things being equal, allowing a little bit, Steve, you're not going to get perfection. all you people, you're not going to get perfection, but you will have an idea that, okay, they can carry on. And that's my opinion of it. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Rogers. So we'll
Thank you.
take some closing comments from Councillor Mitten then, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, colleagues. And can I thank you for those kind words that you shared regarding my leadership? You know, there are certainly tough times that I've had in the last couple of months, and they really have resonated and do mean a lot to me. So I appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you from the Assurance Board as well. Steve, many thanks to you for giving this presentation tonight, and the collaboration and the work that we've done to date, as everybody's alluded to in all of the different portfolios, you know, with Christine, with Chris, with Tony, and not forgetting Max as well. I found his training, his support, his guidance actually invaluable as well. So just want to give thanks to him. I know he's not here, but just want to give thanks to him. Look, there is much to be singing our praises about. There's many challenges still ahead for us. We're not naive in that game at all. You know, it is how we have to take this forward. And yes, we're still going to have those challenges with certainly some of our toughest portfolios, social services and education, and not forgetting, as you've already spoken about, the impact of COVID-19 on all of those services as well. For me, shall I swear? No, I won't swear. But look, we do, and we have talked about the exit strategy. But I won't be swearing this evening, because guess what? Even though you have been around and you're still going to be around for some time, that challenge has been welcomed. It really has, because it's really made us sit up, listen, you know, and make some invaluable changes as well. You know, we've listened to, you know, in relation to those capacity issues. We're strengthening those portfolios now where it's been depleted or you know, pulled apart previously. We're now strengthening that. You know, we've got a fantastic apprenticeship and kickstart program coming in. That succession planning is coming through. The RTI, I can't commend our officers enough, and certainly councillors who've worked towards this, but obviously my cabinet members as well, who really have pulled out all the stops, you know, to work together. And then when we've come together as those cross-party groups as well, to make sure that we are doing what's right for Merthyr Tydfil. And look, it's often said the Merthyr Tydfil is an area of deprivation. We're a deprived local authority. I don't want to use those words anymore. We are a local authority. Merthyr Tydfil County Borough is a place of opportunity, and we can see that, can't we? We can certainly see that coming through. So I just want to end on giving you thanks for your support. Thanks for your challenge. Thank you for taking us and steering us through this period. Hope to work with you for, shall I say, a little while longer. You know, maybe Steve, you and I will continue to have those discussions. I did speak to the minister about it, and, you know, expressed, you know, my thanks to you guys, but also that exit strategy as well. So look, we'll have that deliberation and debate again soon. And I'm really confident that, yes, while everything's not going to be crossed the T's and dotted the I's, there's certainly that reassurance for you, the minister and the board, to say that we are going in the right direction. So many thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Leader. So thanks once again to Steve and his team for an excellent presentation. It's been a really useful discussion around it as well. But I think we better move on to item number 4 on the agenda now, which is minutes of previous meetings. It's items 4A to 4G. Is there a proposer, please? Councillor Milton?
I'm doing mute again. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I was doing this in cabinet earlier. Yes, sorry. I moved the minutes of the meeting.
Okay, is there a seconder, please?
I second the minutes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Are there any questions on the minutes? Councillor Julian Amos.
Yeah, I don't usually make this comment, but I will tonight. This is regarding the scrutiny minutes, really, not the others, not council or cabinet or planning. But this isn't a reflection on the minute taker, but I don't see how they can be a full and accurate reflection of the meeting if all you've got on there is questions. Because if you take a look at them, I think almost all of them, they say these questions were asked and they provide a list. And then they said something like, I have got them, but I won't go through them. Officers gave answers gave full answers.
I'm
Well, I
sorry,
think
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to have to interrupt at this point. These minutes are not up for debate. They're to be approved for accuracy only. Now, I take the point that you make, Councillor Amos, but it's a debate that we need to have somewhere else, because all that you're asked to do is say whether there's anything that you say is inaccurate in those minutes. And if there isn't, then we need to just move them through.
Well, yeah, Carys, that's what I said. I don't think they are accurate because they don't give the answers.
Well, that's not inaccuracy. That's a difference of opinion about what needs to be recorded. So unless you're going to move that something needs to be changed in the minutes because it's inaccurate, it's not a correct record of what happened, not about whether it's a full record of what happened. That's a different debate, and you and I can discuss that somewhere else. This isn't a debate about the accuracy of the minutes, about the content of the minutes. This is simply, are they accurate? And if they are, then we need to move to the vote.
Well, can I suggest they're inaccurate by omission?
Yes, you can suggest it, and then we'll have a discussion about it somewhere else, and then we'll move to the vote, please.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Amos, and thank you, Monitoring Officer, for the clarification. So, are there any other questions regarding the minutes? No. Any comments on the minutes? No. Over to Carys to take it to the vote then, please.
Yes, and we will do this in the same way as we've done with every other. So can I ask, first of all, any member who wishes to abstain, please show now. Thank you. Any member wishing to vote against, please show now. Thank you. All those members voting in favour, please show now. Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's carried.
Mr. Mayor, you're on mute. You're doing a classic me now.
Sorry, yeah, I'm on mute. Sorry. Yeah, thank you very much. You'll make sure we lower our hands, please, and then we'll move on to agenda item number 5: medium-term financial plan update, financing the recovery, transformation, and improvement plan. Is that Councillor Andrew Barry? Are you going to?
It is, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. The medium-term financial plan financing the recovery, transformation, improvement plan. The majority, if not all, members would have seen the detail of the report through the workshops we've arranged. This has been presented to the Assurance Board in June, members in workshops from March, most recently this month, July. Members will see at 4.2 the key questions for any surplus now invested in the RTI plan to progress towards future sustainability. Does this create a financial return? Does it avoid future costs? Does this investment produce service resilience? What is the risk mitigation and improved performance? All simple, basic business principles that we should apply to everything now. Table 1 of page 35 of your papers will see the proposed commitment from our revenue investment over the length of the medium-term financial plan, explained where the £802,000 is going to be invested. There is still some work to do to be carried out on the analysis of that return on the investment that will report back to, I'm sure, audit and budget board in good time. 5.2 explains the required investment will come from the revenue outturn surplus, the surplus being at the moment of £4.464 million, substantial surplus. Appendix 1 outlines the revenue investment in some detail. We have 2 recommendations, Mr. Mayor. 2.1, the proposed investment requirements detailed at Appendix 1 be approved, and 2.2, to part finance the investment, utilisation of 312,000 of the digital transformation monies received from Welsh Government be approved. I move, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. Is there a seconder, please?
Yes, I'm happy to second that, Mr. Mayor, and everything that Councillor Barry has outlined in the summary of the report as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Minton. We've got some questions. First is from Councillor Clive Jones, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I first of all take members to page 35? It's under 5.1, the table 1 there, summary revenue investment requirement. And the bottom of that, of the description, states funding secured for those years 21-22 up to 2025-26. And in the narrative, it says under 5.2 there, in the middle of that, the recurring investment for the period 22-23 to 25-26 is proposed to be financed from the indicative additional demands within the medium-term financial plan projected budget deficits. Could I ask what guarantees we've got that the monies required for that revenue investment going on up to 25-26, in view of the fact that the additional demands that face us every year seems to be increasing, and of course at the national area in the UK government, the UK Chancellor is already tightening the purse strings, and this is going to go on. So what guarantees have we got that we will be able to find those monies under the heading of additional demands? I've got some other questions after that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I can take that question. And what we've basically got here is that we have got a contingency within our budget gaps in going forward each financial year. And as you rightly say, is that we do have an element of growth which we accommodate each year. So what this investment actually means is that this investment will have to be financed from that element of growth which we have within our MTFP funding gaps. And what the assurance is in going forward is that we can't give 100% assurance, but in looking at the investment as part of the RTI plan, is that there will be an element of that investment which will lead to the avoidance of costing going forward. So that's where that in normal times you would expect potentially an element of growth, and that will now be just avoided in going forward. But there still needs to be a little bit more meat added to the bone and over the next few months.
Could I just add to that, Mr. Mayor? There are no guarantees, Councillor Jones, as Steve has alluded to, but it's that investment in the future which is the key. One of the key areas that we're investing in is looked after children, by far the most volatile element of the social services budget, and social services budget being by far the most volatile area of our budget requirement. The in-authority facility that we're developing, it's all down to timing, but the in-house facility, there are 4 beds and 4 step-down flats that we're planning. And in the RPB, Councillor Chris Davis is working on a regional footprint for an out-of-authority bed availability as well, which will also reduce that highly volatile, if not the most volatile area of what we deal with. Those you'll be aware through audit the amount of money that we have to pay out of town when we end up buying in those facilities, extraordinarily expensive. So there are no guarantees, but with the investment that we've put in, there's I think it's 2.5 million in the reserves that we're projecting. That is long-term investment in terms of ensuring that we don't have those costs. And with the social services investment, we're not only reducing the cost by having our own facility, but when those facilities become available for children outside of our area, it becomes an income generator for us as well. So we've covered all bases on that front. So although we can't guarantee that that's going to be the case, that we're going to have that money. We're doing all we can really to sort of mitigate the volatility of everything else we have to deal with.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for those answers. As I said, I got further questions. Can I take members to page 41 of the plan? And the questions on this page is under the heading Environmental Wellbeing, and reference 12 under the description states, install one charge point to research the market. And in the comments it says, to understand how much demand there is for electric chargers, we want to install a charger in one of our public car parks, and the estimated cost for that this year is £5,000. My question it really is, don't we need to perhaps consider putting these electric chargers in more than one public car park to estimate clearly the demand? Because within the next 9 years, all of us are going to have to give up our petrol or diesel driven vehicles, and so the government is insisting and go over to electric cars.
Sorry, can I
yes.
before Judy comes in? You make an excellent point, Clive. One of the challenges that we've given to Ian Goldsworthy, the decarbonisation guy, is that we see on paper the potential savings and the effect that decarbonisation, electric charging points, etc., will make to this town. One of the challenges we've given him now through the decarbonisation board is to show the people of Merthyr and to show members what exactly that looks like. Where will we have those charging points throughout the borough? What impact will that have? What do we believe that those predicted savings from decarbonisation and electric charging points, what is that going to look like? So we hope, and I'm sure Judith will expand on it, but we hope to bring a report where that visualization comes, because it's an excellent point, and we need to show the people and the residents of Merthyr how that is going to play out.
Thanks. Yeah, as you can imagine, these issues are advancing every day, you know, decarbonisation and carbon reduction issues, electric vehicles, you know, things change by the week. The intention of this investment was, as I said, to test the market to see what interest there is. Understand your point about is one enough, but this will just be one of many means of us getting data to see what the interest is locally. So, you know, we have access to Welsh Government data, to the energy service data that is, you know, research is going on behind the scenes in terms of interest in this particular locality for electric vehicle charging. You know, there's also electric vehicle charging that are in retailers, that are in private businesses, etc. That we can get information from just to test the market.
Okay, thank you for that. And keeping on the same page, 41, number 16 refers to the production of a net zero carbon plan and policy. And on the comments, it said this investment will enable MTCBC to appoint an entity specialist to produce a net zero carbon plan and roadmap. And as Councillor Barry has already referred to the fact that we have an energy officer, and there's £25,000 been set aside in this financial year. So could someone explain to me the necessity for this work when you have in fact got an energy officer?
Certainly, yeah. Two different things essentially. What we're asking to be produced here is a net zero plan. So the scope of this plan will give us our baseline as to where we currently are in terms of our carbon use, etc. We've commissioned a company called Green Environmental Partnership. Many other authorities have done the same, and they will produce this plan which tells us where we are now, how we can get towards net zero, what interventions, what projects, etc., and a roadmap to get us there.
So this is a one-off for this current financial year in that respect?
It is correct, yeah.
Right, thank you. And Mr. Mayor, page 42, it refers there to, under the heading Healthy Organisation, it refers to 23, 24 and 25. And in the comments for each one, at the very end of it, it says this post was identified as part of the independent review of the HR department, future HR service, and current capacity report February 21. So there is a spend there of £109,000 continuing. Has this been budgeted for in the estimates earlier on this year?
Yeah, if I could confirm that that hasn't been part of the capacity exercise, which was budgeted for last March, that this was an independent review by a HR specialist. So this wasn't part of the budget round last March.
So the fact that it's in the report tonight, you're clearly then asking for us, this is in addition to what we budgeted for, and if we approve the whole report, we'll approve that £109,000 spend continuing.
Yes, is this £109,000 which you're asking for finance for, and that is an element of that report. I believe it is. So, but yes, it's investment are those areas.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Darren Roberts, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two questions from myself, and I'm not expecting comprehensive answers. Short and sweet would suffice, Mr. Mayor, on this one. As Steve Thomas mentioned in his report, this is something that the Assurance Board has been pushing for some time, and it's fair to say that the Recovery, Transformation and Improvement Plan is a really important plan for the local authority. So my first question is, has this been placed on the forward work programme for the relevant scrutiny committee? And if so, could regular updates come back to full council so that all members that are not present on that scrutiny committee can receive further updates? Thank you.
I can come in there, Councillor, and the answer to both would be yes.
So the kind of answer I'm looking for. Thank you, Andrew.
Yes, you did ask for short and sweet, didn't you? Okay, are there any comments on the report, please? No, no one is indicating, so I'll pass you over to the monitoring officer for the vote then, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So could I ask all members who wish to abstain on this matter, could you please show now? Thank you. Could I ask all members who wish to vote against the recommendations, please show now? Thank you. And all members who wish to vote in favour of the recommendations, please show now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's carried.
Thank you very much. So if we could all lower our hands, please. And we'll move on to agenda item number 6, Kavartha Heritage Area, a special purpose vehicle. And I believe that Councillor Geraint Thomas is going to introduce this item.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Basically giving a bit of an update, everyone update as well of what's going on with the foundation. As you know, it was established in June 2020, and in October 2020, Council approved the appointment of 2 councillors as directors and trustees onto the SPV. The Kavartha Foundation are currently in the process of applying for charitable status. On the 4th of November 2020, Council approved the Kavartha plan, and the launch of the plan was held in January 2021. The board of the foundation is limited to 12 members and currently includes 2 elected members of Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council whose first duty is to the Cyfarthfa Foundation and 3 other trustees. Saxon Banflied has been appointed to recruit the remaining trustees. These trustees will include people who will give a community representation together with a range of relevant specialist expertise decided and agreed by the council. We're quite a way along that journey now, and the shortlisted potential trustees are going to be interviewed in August. In March 2021, Welsh Government approved the award of £1.2 million development funding to the Cyfarthfa Foundation. The purpose of the award was to establish a team to support development and delivery of the Cyfarthfa plan, to put the necessary policy structures and mechanisms into place to oversee any work and to undertake any appropriate studies as required. An internal Cyfarthfa Heritage Area Asset Group has been established, including regeneration, estates and legal. The purpose of the group is to review the current assets identified in the plan and to document all existing lease arrangements. A decision needs to be made as to which assets are to be leased to the Cyfarthfa Foundation and on what terms they are to be leased. Discussions also need to be undertaken with Merthyr Tydfil Leisure Trust to ensure that there is a smooth transition of the assets. So if I go straight to the recommendations, Mr. Mayor, the contents of the report be approved. I so move.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Is there a seconder, please?
Yes, I second that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And Councillor Clive Jones has a question, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a few. I'm glad to hear from Councillor Geraint-Thomas in relation to 1.5 and the summary of the report on page 45 that Saxon Banflied, what a name, has been appointed to recruit the remaining trustees, and that the appointments are going to be made in August, because I think you need the full squad of 12 trustees to continue with all the decisions that got to be made about this Cyfarthfa plan. But it goes on to say these trustees will include people who will give a community representation. And could I ask if you could clarify exactly what you mean by community representation? Does that mean that there will be representatives from within the community of Merthyr Tydfil?
Hopefully so, Clive. One of the original members, the original trustees, is a Merthyr girl, born and bred, now living in London, has a fantastic job in the city up there, and she's on board. And currently as well, we're looking as part of this process, some of the people that's applied to join the board are local people.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. That's pleasing to hear. And my other questions are on page 48, paragraph 5, under the heading Cyfarthfa Heritage Areas Assets. And my two there are in relation to 5.4, with the condition surveys being undertaken on the Pandy Farm, Annis Fark, Engine House and Joseph Parry's cottage. So you've got those. It goes on to say a condition survey will be undertaken on the castle in the summer of 2021. We're in the middle of the, I would say, the middle of the summer, or nearly there at the moment. When will that condition survey be finished? And will all members have a copy of that? Because there's been surveys undertaken on the castle previously. But I understand, for example, once again, the roof is leaking on this building.
If I start, Councillor Jones, and obviously then we'll bring in the experts then, the professionals to back me up. But yeah, I think at the moment, I know Carwyn Morris's team, the engineers, are looking at the castle, looking at Pontycafnau Bridge and looking at the furnaces, because as we're all aware, the Pontycafnau Bridge is currently closed due to the previous storm, the last storm that damaged it. It wasn't Storm Dennis, but it was the storm after that that's damaged that. So I don't know if any of the officers would like to come in. I don't really know when Judith or is Carwyn Morris in the meeting, and they can tell you a little bit more.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Thomas. I'll come in first and defer if there's any further information required. Yeah, the briefs for the condition surveys have almost been finalised, Councillor Jones. They'll go out and they need to be completed this calendar year.
So particularly in relation to the castle, because that's the the largest building, the jewel in the crown, will all elected members be able to have a copy of that survey as a matter of real interest?
We'd be more than happy to put a series of briefing sessions on as we go through this process, because obviously the public interest of this particular building and these particular projects are very important to Merthyr Tydfil. Yes,
you're quite right, and thank you for the answer. My other question is in relation to 5.5, and it says the group has identified it will take approximately 18 months to 2 years to deal with the transfer of assets. This information will be detailed further in the next report to Council. Now, I'm fully aware that when we involve solicitors on both sides, that this can slow up the progress. But I really cannot understand why it's going to take up to 2 years to deal with the transfer of assets. And we've been talking about the transfer of assets, Mr. Mayor, for quite some time.
Yeah, if I can come back in there, Councillor Jones. Probably Caris is the person to probably ratify what I'm going to say. But when we went through the process of transferring the assets to the Leisure Trust, it took in excess of 3 years, just because of the legal process of drawing up all the relevant agreements, the paperwork, the legal documents. So we anticipate that's going to happen in that time period. But obviously, with the transfer of these assets and the analysis of which assets go over, and the scope of which they go over within, then we now have hindsight with the process we went through with the Leisure Trust. So perhaps Caris would like to make a comment.
Yes, I think probably the only thing I can add, which might be helpful, is that it's not just the same as buying and selling a house. Everything with all of this historical significance, that creates all sorts of legal caveats that go alongside any transfer of those assets. So the process needs to take into account accurately all of those things, because we can't afford the risk of missing something which may then impede the way we want to make use of assets in the future. So it's a very detailed, very complicated process, and I'm afraid that's how long it takes.
And I think we benefit from Chris Long coming in, because obviously Chris is very close to the process.
Yeah, and we will have the reports, because you mentioned that the reports would come to Council somewhere. Will we have, updated reports so that all members are well informed about it?
The only point I wanted to add was, I think as the report alludes to, we set up a new company, right? So the company's got to be set up with trustees, policies. In theory, it's a startup company, right? They have a great opportunity in terms of the £1.2 million of revenue. So it's a timing really in terms of twofold. The strategy work stream is one, asset assessment, structural survey, durability. We don't want to hand over lame ducks. We want to make sure they're right, fit and proper, and in a position that we can hand over to a company that's growing as well. So 2 work streams here, making sure the company grows, it has its staff. There's no staff at the moment. He'll have a good board. He'll recruit the skeleton staff with our support. Running in parallel, the assets will be assessed, and at that point, it will transfer. So 2 years is, I know it seems a long time, right? But as Alan's alluded to, it took us longer when we had a company set up, right? So we got to make sure we get this right, Councillor Jones, I think. And I think the other point as well is, I think, you know, I think we've learned lessons from doing it previously, right? And I think we need to learn fiercely from that to make sure we set this up right, that it's got that international pedigree opportunity really that we really want.
What I would like to add, Councillor Jones, is the quality and calibre of the board members, the external board members that we have at the moment is second to none, and the fact that the board has been able to access £1.2 million worth of funding from the Welsh Government, I think speaks volumes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones, and thank you, officers, for the clarification. Councillor Tanya Skinner has a question.
Yeah, it was just on the one of the things we've been pulled up on before is actually in this meeting was around sometimes we lack that strategic ability to link plans together and look at the broad overview. So my question is around the recent active travel plan, and was the Cyfarthfa master plan taken into account when the active travel plan was produced and discussed, because one would drastically affect the other in terms of traffic flow, increased traffic. So that's my first question. I'm not quite sure who would best be placed to answer that. And then I've just got one other question.
You, me?
Go on, do you want to take that first, Chris, and I'll come in?
Yeah, one of our concerted efforts in terms of creating our economic recovery plan, stroke town centre master plan, is a refinement of strategies. I think it's been mentioned tonight earlier that we have too many strategies. As a department, we are refining strategy. We'll have a new economic recovery plan linked to the RTI plan, etc., etc. So the new creation of active travel I&M integrated network plan will obviously link to the tourism product quite succinctly, and drawing reference to some of the heritage assets, i.e. the castle, the furnaces, Joseph Parry's cottage and the Sfach engine house. The active travel network, i.e. the Taff Trail, will run straight to that, right? So in short, it did capture it previously. I think in the master plan Cyfarthfa area, it did recognise the importance of trails. It recognised the importance of the waterway as a connection from Pontycafnau, the furnaces, right the way through down to the weir. Right. So, and again, as members will know, we are really keen to develop strategies around, making more use of the water on our trails. So short answer is yes, but it should be more prominent in the future, Councillor Skinner.
Yeah, Chris, I'm all for I'm all for promoting our trails and the concept of active travel, but my question was more around the plans to take away a lane, for example, which would have a huge impact on the local residents. I know that myself and Councillor Jones have been talking with residents who were really, really concerned about it. And I think it would be remiss of me to not bring that up tonight, right, because obviously I think the two things are quite closely linked. Yeah. So I just wanted to reiterate my question really is that taking away a lane, was that taken into consideration in terms of the impact on the increased traffic that the master plan will bring?
Okay. If I can jump in there, Chris. I mean, the solitude question, Councillor Skinner, yes, the Cyfarthfa master plan took into consideration all those active travel routes, but the fact that we've brought all those various functions into one department to create an economic focus, which links with the communities, I think has been testament this week. The fact that we were able to resolve very quickly the very local issue that you're referring to.
Okay, Thank you, Alan. And just the other question was just around, it just goes back to, I think, Clive's original question about local representation. And I understand and absolutely support the fact that we have to have really good experience and knowledge, and and the more we've got of those in those people, the better the project will be overall. But I just wonder, what is the process about picking that local representation? So, for example, somebody from Park Ward will have more of a knowledge of the surrounding area than somebody, say, from the lower wards or more sort of Pentre way. So it's just, I just wanted to ask, what is the rationale or framework for recruiting these board members?
The basic rationale is experience and suitability in the first instance, Councillor Skinner. But we are actually working on that issue with the interim board at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Alan. That's all. Thanks, guys.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Skinner. If there are no more questions, are there any comments on this, please? No, there's no one indicating. Oh, yes, Councillor Clive Jones is indicating.
I believe Clive came in with a question, didn't you, Clive?
Pardon?
I believe you come in with a question, Clive, earlier, didn't you?
Well, I've got comments. I mean, and my comments are altered as a result of the answers, Mr. Mayor. I feel passionate about this whole issue of the Cyfarthfa plan. I'm born and bred in Merthyr Tydfil, and I live currently to the one side of Cyfarthfa Park, and the other areas are not very far away. And I attended the castle when it was a grammar school, and I'm one of the 3 Park Ward councillors. So I'm extremely interested how this plan takes shape. It will undoubtedly put Merthyr Tydfil on the tourist map big time and attract visitors from all over the world. And it will be clearly of economic benefit to the local population and the surrounding South Wales valleys. And I'm aware that the plans need a lot of work undertaken behind the scenes. I don't really understand why it's going to take 25 years or more to come to fruition, and hence the questions that I've asked. I've clearly more than happy that you're now appointing the further trustees, and hopefully we will have the full 12 attending there from meetings, hopefully from September onwards. Mr. Mayor, I just feel that we need to get on with things and escalate the pace of making decisions on such a vital project as the Cyfarthfa plan. And I hope to see some of these, the end result of these plans, before I disappear off this earth. And hopefully that will not be in the too distant future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I'm sure you'll be with us for many, many years to come.
Thank you for it.
Councillor Geraint Thomas is indicating he's got a comment, but has anybody else got a comment before I bring him in? Because that'll close the debate. No one else is indicating. So, Councillor Geraint Thomas, then, please.
No, I'm with you, Clive. You know, I hope it won't take 25 years either. I think, you know, it all comes down to finance and how quickly we raise the finance and how quickly, you know, we can get, you know, work underway on some of these fantastic assets that is our heritage. We're going to go through stages really along the way. The first stage of the first board is all about building something, isn't it? It's all about building architecture, you know, marketing what's coming. And then the next iteration of the board then will be hopefully how do you run this fantastic international tourist attraction? So I think there's going to be many steps along the way. Board members will come, board members will go as we go along that journey. And I think, you know, officers and myself and Lisa, the leader here, will tell you all, you know, we're going to be fairly open, you know, with what's going to go on, and we'll bring regular reports to council to show you, and show the people of Merthyr, more importantly, and the people of the region, you know, what we've got in store and planned into the future.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Monitoring officer, would you like to conduct a vote, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Can we therefore take it to the vote, and can I ask all those who would wish to abstain on this item, please show now. Thank you. Can I ask all of those voting against the recommendation, please show now. Thank you. And all those voting in favour, please show now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's carried.
Thank you very much. If everybody could lower their hands, please. Items 7 to 11 are information reports. Item 12, to deal with any urgent business or correspondence, there is none. Item 13, to receive communications from His Worship the Mayor, I have none. Item 14, in order for the following to be considered in private, it is suggested that the public be excluded from the meeting on the grounds that it involves likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 14 under part 4 of Schedule 12A, section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972. Would someone like to propose that, please?
Yes, can I propose the section 100, please, Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that, please?
I second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Can we take that straight to a vote, monitoring officer?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I think I'll just say, could all those in favour please show? Thank you, and that's carried, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. So can we confirm when everybody who's not in the should be in the meeting has left?
I think you can go ahead now, Mr. Mayor.
You can go ahead. Thank you.